It was the kind of night that made history feel alive, the air humming with energy, as if the world itself held its breath. Beneath the dazzling arena lights, the crowd's roar ebbed and flowed like the pulse of a giant beast. They had come for one reason: to witness a clash between two men who seemed cut from stone, each driven by the same unyielding desire to prove himself the best. And tonight, they'd leave nothing behind but sweat, pain, and whatever shattered dreams couldn't survive the onslaught. Mike Tyson stepped into the ring with the same fierce presence that had terrified opponents for decades. Though his prime had been declared over by many, there was a fire in his eyes that burned as hot as ever. Age had tempered his power with experience, his movements calculated yet primal, as if each punch was a piece of himself unleashed. He carried with him the weight of his legacy, one built on brutality and brilliance in equal measure. Tyson was a man who'd walked through storms of his own making and come out the other side, hardened but not broken. Across the ring stood Apollo Crews, a man known more for his feats in the wrestling world than the unforgiving landscape of pure combat. Yet what most dismissed as showmanship, Apollo had honed into genuine strength and athleticism. His physique was a testament to discipline, his agility bordering on the impossible. This wasn't just a money fight for him. It was a chance to silence the voices that had questioned his legitimacy, the critics who insisted he couldn't survive against a fighter of Tyson's caliber. Crews wasn't just here to fight, he was here to redefine his own name. The build-up to the fight had been a spectacle in itself, with interviews and press conferences brimming with tension and anticipation. Tyson had been dismissive at first, his tone somewhere between curiosity and annoyance. "Wrestling's not fighting," he had said, his words sharp enough to draw blood. Yet Apollo had only smiled, his calmness unshaken. "It's not just about fighting. It's about surviving." And for Tyson, a man who had spent his life clawing his way up from nothing, those words struck deeper than he would ever admit. Fight night brought a different air between them. Respect tempered the hostility, but it did nothing to dilute the competition. Tyson's name alone was enough to fill arenas, his legend forged through years of sheer brutality and brilliance. Crews, however, was fighting for more than glory. He was fighting to carve his own place in a world that had always looked at him as an outsider. The atmosphere inside the arena had shifted from excitement to something sharper, something with teeth. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, eyes locked on the two men who now stood mere feet apart. The referee's voice was distant, almost drowned out by the thunderous applause. Every detail felt magnified: Tyson's clenched fists, Crews's coiled stance, both men waiting for the moment to explode. For Tyson, the fight was a return to the vicious beauty of pure combat. No scripts, no choreographed routines, just the raw exchange of will and muscle, the collision of two lives expressed through fists. But as the seconds ticked by, he couldn't ignore the unsettling calmness in Crews's eyes. There was no sign of intimidation, no hesitation. Instead, Crews moved with the confidence of a man who had prepared for this moment with obsessive dedication. As the bell rang, they collided with the force of a natural disaster. Tyson's fists came like sledgehammers, each one thrown with the intent to shatter bone and will alike. Yet Crews was elusive, his movements fluid, unpredictable. He absorbed the hits that landed with a resilience few had expected, countering with bursts of speed that made even the seasoned Tyson hesitate. It became clear that this wasn't going to be a one-sided affair. Tyson's power was undeniable, but Crews's agility and stamina began to shift the rhythm of the fight. He danced just outside the reach of Tyson's most devastating blows, landing jabs and hooks with precision, before darting away like a shadow. It wasn't just skill, it was strategy. And it was working. The audience watched in stunned fascination as Apollo Crews held his ground against a man who had once been the most feared fighter on the planet. Whispers spread through the crowd, conversations punctuated by gasps and cheers. The clash between brute strength and sheer athleticism was unfolding before their eyes, unpredictable and wild. But even as the fight dragged on, the intensity only grew. Tyson was adapting, his strikes becoming sharper, more calculated. His breathing remained steady, his gaze locked onto Cruz with the predatory focus of a man who had weathered worse storms. And yet, something about Apollo's resilience was beginning to eat away at him. Tyson could feel the doubt creeping in, a sensation he despised as much as defeat itself. Apollo, for his part, fought with the desperation of a man who knew this was his moment. He had trained relentlessly for this night, his body sculpted into a weapon forged through pain and determination. Every time Tyson closed the distance, Apollo met him with a flash of movement and a sting of knuckles against flesh. But no matter how precise his counters were, Tyson's sheer power was a looming threat, one that could end everything in a heartbeat. The rounds bled into each other, sweat flying from bodies locked in a brutal dance. Yet despite the punishment they exchanged, neither man showed signs of surrender. Tyson's punches grew heavier, his breathing more ragged, but his eyes remained sharp. Cruz's agility hadn't faded, but his own strikes were coming with less force, his stamina beginning to fray at the edges. But then, just as Tyson pressed forward with a ferocity that threatened to overwhelm, something shifted. Apollo's footwork stumbled, his guard lowering for a split second. Tyson's eyes narrowed, instincts flaring. The crowd sensed it, the tension thick enough to slice through. In that heartbeat of vulnerability, Tyson unleashed a devastating right hook that connected with a thunderous crack, the force reverberating through the arena like a gunshot. Apollo staggered, his balance unraveling as pain tore through his senses. But even as he wavered, a determined fire glinted in his gaze. Tyson lunged forward, his fists poised to deliver the finishing blow. Yet before he could strike, Apollo did something no one expected. He smiled. The audience erupted, their voices colliding in a frenzy of disbelief and excitement. Tyson paused, his fists clenched, eyes narrowing in confusion. Why was Apollo smiling? And more importantly, what did he know that Tyson didn't? Tyson's fists remained raised, ready to deliver the final blow, but Apollo's smile was more than a gesture, it was a challenge. The crowd roared in confusion and excitement, their cheers splintered by disbelief. Tyson hesitated, eyes narrowing as he searched Apollo's face for some hint of mockery or surrender. But Apollo's gaze burned with something else entirely. It was a daring, almost reckless kind of resolve, as if pain itself had been twisted into fuel. Apollo swayed but refused to fall, his legs quivering beneath him like a bridge straining under too much weight. Yet somehow, he kept his footing. His smile hadn't faded. It had only grown sharper, almost predatory. Tyson felt his own confidence waver, the certainty of victory now tainted by doubt. He had faced countless fighters, men who charged at him like bulls, others who danced away from him like ghosts. But Apollo Cruz was different. He fought, as if the pain itself was proof that he still had more to give. Apollo's sudden burst of laughter cut through the noise, low and guttural, like a man teetering on the edge of madness or brilliance. Tyson's fists twitched, his instincts demanding he strike again, but something held him back. This wasn't a man begging for mercy or resignation. No, Apollo was daring him to keep going, daring him to test whatever hidden strength he still possessed. Then Apollo surged forward, his footwork clean, swift, as if the blow he had taken was nothing more than a distant ache. His fists snapped through the air with a precision Tyson hadn't expected, catching him with jabs that seemed to pierce rather than bruise. Tyson responded with thunderous hooks, his power undeniable, but Apollo was no longer simply evading, he was adapting. Every time Tyson struck, Apollo found a way to slip just enough to lessen the impact, his counters coming faster, sharper. It was as if he'd been holding something back, conserving energy for this very moment. Tyson's mind raced to catch up, his breath hitching as Apollo began to drive him backward. The crowd's roar shifted, astonishment spreading like wildfire. This was supposed to be Tyson's victory lap, a spectacle to reaffirm his dominance. But Apollo was tearing that expectation apart with every passing second. The unpredictability of Apollo's movements became a nightmare to track. He'd feint left, only to twist right, slipping through Tyson's defenses with a fluidity that defied logic. Tyson's frustration simmered, his punches growing heavier, but also slower, his power working against him as Apollo continued to chip away, one precise strike at a time. The twist came not from Tyson's strength or Apollo's resilience, but from the revelation that Apollo had been fighting with a deeper strategy all along. His earlier struggles weren't the result of inexperience or overwhelming fear. No, they were bait, deliberate moments designed to lull Tyson into believing he was breaking Apollo down. But now, the truth was evident. Apollo had been studying Tyson's movements, memorizing his timing, his habits. And now he was exploiting every flaw. Apollo unleashed a barrage of punches that left Tyson staggering, the sudden aggression stunning everyone watching. Tyson's arms rose to shield his face, but Apollo's assault wasn't about brute force. It was a storm of precision, each strike aimed with surgical intent. Tyson's breathing grew labored, his muscles aching from both the exertion and the repeated blows. Yet Apollo showed no sign of slowing down. Tyson's own fury began to blur his focus. He lashed out with raw power, his fists crashing through the air with enough force to crumple bone. But Apollo danced just out of reach, his eyes locked onto Tyson's every movement like a predator stalking prey. It wasn't just defense, it was control. And Tyson could feel it slipping away. For a moment, Tyson's anger flared, his arms swinging with reckless abandon. Apollo took a step back, absorbing a glancing blow that should have staggered him. Instead, he spun with the momentum, using the impact to fuel his next strike. His fist connected cleanly with Tyson's ribcage, the force jolting through him like a shockwave. Tyson grunted, pain flaring through his torso, but worse than the pain was the realization Apollo wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. The audience had shifted from merely watching to witnessing something extraordinary. Apollo Crews was proving himself with every hit, every dodge, every counter. And Tyson, the man who had crushed legends beneath his fists, was now facing a challenge that seemed to grow stronger with each round. Apollo's smile returned, but this time it carried a knowing edge. He had found Tyson's rhythm, disrupted it, and now he was forcing the fight onto his own terms. His punches came in unpredictable flurries, a combination of speed and strength that left Tyson guessing. And for the first time that night, Tyson's confidence began to fray. Tyson lashed out with a vicious uppercut meant to end things then and there, but Apollo ducked beneath it, weaving to the side before unleashing a counterstrike that snapped Tyson's head backward. Tyson stumbled, his footing uncertain as his own aggression began to work against him. The realization stung more than any punch Apollo Crews had figured him out. Apollo pressed forward, his strikes relentless, his breathing steady. Tyson tried to regain control, but Apollo's strategy had left him reeling. Every attempt to counter was met with a precision that bordered on perfection. Tyson's fists still carried destructive power, but the timing was off, his usual rhythm shattered by Apollo's relentless adaptability. But Apollo wasn't satisfied with just holding his own. He wanted to break Tyson's dominance, to prove that his place in this ring was earned, not granted by reputation or spectacle. Tyson's legend had been built on terror and triumph, but Apollo was forcing him to confront something more dangerous than any opponent, his own limitations. The crowd's cheers mingled with gasps of disbelief, their voices straining to keep up with the unfolding spectacle. Tyson's shoulders heaved, sweat pouring from his brow, but his eyes remained sharp, the fire within him refusing to be extinguished. Yet Apollo's persistence had shifted the momentum, leaving Tyson on the defensive for the first time that night. But as Apollo launched another furious combination, something in Tyson's gaze changed. The exhaustion remained, the frustration too. But buried beneath that was a spark, a flicker of cunning Tyson hadn't shown before. And as Apollo moved in, ready to deliver another brutal exchange, Tyson made a sudden, unexpected move. He let his guard drop. Apollo's fist flew toward Tyson's jaw, but just as it connected, Tyson twisted with the blow, his body rolling with the impact in a way that absorbed much of the force. The maneuver was almost impossible to detect, but for those who caught it, it was brilliant. Tyson had allowed himself to take the hit to set something up, a trap waiting to be sprung. And Apollo Crews had just stepped into it. Tyson's trap was sprung with a ferocity that defied the pain thrumming through his body. As Apollo's punch grazed his jaw, Tyson shifted his weight with a suddenness that caught Apollo off guard. His right fist shot forward, a piston of raw power aimed at Apollo's midsection. The strike landed with a brutal efficiency, driving the air from Apollo's lungs with a sound that seemed to echo across the arena. Apollo's smile faltered, his breath seized by the blow. For a moment, his feet betrayed him, staggering backward as if the ground itself had turned treacherous. Tyson's instincts took over, his fists following the success of that devastating strike, with a rapid series of hooks and jabs, each punch thrown with the desperation of a man reclaiming control. It was a relentless onslaught, fury honed by years of mastery. But Apollo didn't crumble. Somehow, Apollo's resolve endured, his eyes blazing with a determination that bordered on madness. He absorbed the blows, his guard raised but weakening, his body pushed to the brink. Yet his fists still moved, his strikes returning with a precision Tyson couldn't ignore. Each punch was thrown with purpose, a counter to Tyson's aggression rather than a mere attempt at survival. The crowd was on their feet, their roars a chaotic mix of awe and disbelief. Just as Tyson believed he'd broken Apollo's spirit, the younger fighter unleashed a move that stunned everyone. With a burst of speed that defied his own exhaustion, Apollo ducked beneath Tyson's jab and delivered a brutal uppercut that connected squarely with Tyson's chin. Tyson's vision blurred, his balance teetering as the force of the blow rocked him to his core. Apollo pressed the attack, his fists striking like thunderclaps, each blow calculated to wear Tyson down. But even as his muscles screamed for mercy, Tyson's mind sharpened. He could feel the fight slipping through his fingers, the possibility of defeat creeping closer with each second. Yet something about Apollo's determination stirred something deeper within him. This wasn't just a battle of skill or strength. It was a clash of wills, a test of who could endure more, who could push further when there was nothing left to give. And Tyson's pride refused to let him fall without proving he could still rise. Apollo launched another flurry of strikes, his arms a blur of motion. Tyson evaded what he could, his defense tightening, his movements now a dance of survival and counterattack. Apollo's energy seemed boundless, but Tyson sensed the strain in every punch. They were both fighting on fumes, pushing their bodies beyond what should have been possible. Then Tyson saw it, a subtle falter in Apollo's stance, a fraction of a second where his guard dipped just a little too low. Tyson seized the moment, his left fist crashing into Apollo's ribs with bone-rattling force. Apollo's eyes widened, the pain clearly etched across his face. But Tyson didn't stop there. He twisted his hips and drove a crushing right hook into Apollo's jaw. Apollo crumbled to the canvas, his body hitting the ground with a finality that drew a stunned silence from the crowd. Tyson stood over him, chest heaving, his fists still clenched as if waiting for Apollo to rise once more. But Apollo remained motionless, his breathing ragged but steady. The referee's count echoed through the arena, each number a testament to the brutality of what had just unfolded. Tyson's arms trembled with exhaustion, his vision swimming with the effort it had taken to bring Apollo down. But as the count reached its conclusion, the crowd erupted in cheers that shook the very walls. Yet, amid the celebration, Tyson's gaze never left Apollo. He had earned Tyson's respect in a way few ever had. And as Apollo's eyes fluttered open, a weary smile tugged at his lips, acknowledging not defeat, but survival. Tyson extended a hand, his gesture one of respect rather than triumph. Apollo accepted, his grip weak but steady, his eyes holding a spark of determination that had not been extinguished. It was a fight neither man would ever forget, a testament to their endurance and will. But as they stood there, a realization dawned on Tyson. The battle had pushed him further than he'd anticipated, but it had also revealed something else. Apollo had fought not just to win, but to prove himself, to show that he belonged on the same stage as the greatest. And in that pursuit, he had succeeded beyond all expectation. The rivalry born that night would echo far beyond the arena. Tyson recognized the hunger in Apollo's eyes, a hunger that mirrored his own from years ago. Apollo Crews was not just a challenger. He was the future. And Tyson, despite his victory, knew that their paths would cross again. Even as the cameras flashed and the announcers declared Tyson the winner, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. Apollo had exposed weaknesses he hadn't known were there, forcing him to adapt in ways he hadn't imagined. And though he had emerged victorious, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far greater. As Tyson left the ring, his body aching but his mind alight, he glanced back at Apollo, who was already sitting upright, his expression thoughtful rather than defeated. Tyson's grin was tired but genuine, a silent acknowledgement of the battle they had shared. The crowd's cheers still thundered in the background, but Tyson's thoughts were already moving forward. Because despite the triumph, he knew that Apollo's persistence had lit a fire within him that would not easily be quenched. And as he walked away from the ring, Tyson found himself looking forward to the day Apollo Crews would stand before him again, stronger, faster, and even more determined. The night may have belonged to Tyson, but the future, he realized, might just belong to Apollo.